there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world.
Ајде, мајката!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
The second round of local elections in Macedonia on Sunday, October 31, produces a tsunami for the opposition, VMRO-DPMNE, and a massive defeat for the ruling parties and current government. VMRO-DPMNE gained over 41 mayoral seats throughout the country. SDSM gained fewer than 20, mostly in rural areas. As a result, Zoran Zaev, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Macedonia, announces his resignation as both Prime Minister and as party leader of SDSM before 1991, the League of Communists of Macedonia. I never fail to point that out. But will he actually resign? We'll discuss all of this and nothing else on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin and Jason calling in from Skopje, from soon-to-be Zaev, Macedonia.
Amen. We are recording this episode 125 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast on Monday, November 1, the start of a new month, a new work week, school week, perhaps just a new era for Macedonia as the ruling parties, SDSM and DUI, I should also point out. That's Ali Ahmeti, the former terrorist in LA, National Liberation Army of what? Has suffered massive defeats. DUI lost both Tetovo and Gostivar. VMRO gained the mayor of Skopje, and for all of those keeping track of gender quotas, of course, the city of Skopje, the capital of the Republic of Macedonia, has a female as mayor. And as a result of all this, as I mentioned in the monologue, Zoran Zaev last night, Sunday the 31st, said he was going to resign, but we're recording this a little after 4 p.m. on Monday, November 1, where you are, a little after 8 a.m. where I am in Oro Valley, Arizona. He hasn't actually submitted his resignation yet, has he?
He's going to have to be dragged out, kicking and screaming.
Kicking and screaming, yes. It'll be like Vinko Filipce, the health minister.
Yeah.
So Zaev submits his resignation, but Zaev doesn't accept his resignation type thing. What's the latest? Bring us up to date.
So yeah, it was a complete wipeout yesterday evening when the results came in. As good as the first round, even better in some regards, because many smaller cities which were blackmailed, which were pressured by Zaev, felt that he is losing his grip and switched. So this was an interesting development. So the places which voted for VMRO continued to vote VMRO, but the places which voted, some places that voted SDSM in the first round actually had a rapid change of heart and decided to join in with the victorious side. So VMRO won in Skopje by almost 30,000 votes, which is a wipeout. VMRO won in Bitola and Ohrid. So VMRO won the cities, both cities, very important cultural, economic. VMRO won them in the first round, but not by enough to elect the mayor outright, like in Prilep, Veles, Štip. So these were I was a bit nervous about these places. And we kept getting reports that turnout is much higher than the first round. But over the day, it got into a normal international rhythm and ended up almost just slightly higher than the first round. But initially in the morning, it looked like there is a turnout, especially in Ohrid and Bitola, and in the center of Skopje, which is more SDSM. So SDSM were very, happy. They're very, optimistic. They said our voters, who set out the first round, are now turning out. Zaev's appeal to the public that we join in to defeat VMRO is working. So we are turning this thing around. But then in the end, when we saw the numbers, he actually lost by even bigger margins than in the first round in many places. So he lost a bunch of smaller cities, like so the ones who voted for him in the first round were like Resen, Makedonska Kamenica, I think Pichchevo, Gevgelija, I think, was also on his side. Kočani was a big fight. Mickovsky personally had to go there the day before the election because there was a bunch of Roma people who voted for Zaev, who practically relied on minorities, on bribing, on buying the poor people in the cities, the poorest segments of society, and often this is the Roma. And a crew was recording the scene when the Roma were, buying, a group of Roma were buying the votes of their fellow Roma citizens and taking their identity cards to probably vote in their stead or something. And they attacked the crew, so Mickovsky was there, personally got into a heated argument as the police was practically in this place and in Gevgelija and in parts of Skopje was actually escorting and helping Zaev's thugs buy votes, intimidate voters. So we had a very heated situation before the election. So Kočani flipped. A bunch of rural municipalities also flipped for VMRO. So like Lozovo, where there was a notorious wife beater nominated by Zaev as mayor. So yeah, VMRO won comprehensively. Zaev won a few mid-sized cities like, Probishtip and places like that. And in Skopje, which was the main race, where Zaev said that he will resign if he loses the city. So we had the race in the city overall. We had the races in downtown in two municipalities which are normally trending SDSM. This is Karpoš and Cinter. And we had a race in the Roma neighborhood of Šuto Rizari and in Čair, the Albanian neighborhood. So Zaev was hoping, okay, VMRO won all the VMRO voting parts of the city in the first round. They have their mayors there. They only had, while in our parts of the city and in the minority parts of the city, we are electing also a local mayor. So we will have a higher turnout in our parts of Skopje, while the VMRO voters will feel that they finished the job in the first round and they will sit out the second round when they are supposed to vote for the overall mayor of Skopje between Petra Šilegov and Daniela Arsovska, who was nominated by VMRO. So Zaev was thinking this will drive down their turnout and drive up our turnout on the SDSM side. And it absolutely didn't work. So VMRO won Karpoš, one of the two districts which SDSM was counting on winning for sure, with Stevče Jakimovsky, this famous / notorious mayor of old, who split from SDSM to join with VMRO. They lost in Cinter, but very narrowly. In the Roma neighborhood in Šuto Rizari, Daniela Arsovska actually won over SDSM, which is unbelievable. In Sarai, the Albanian part west of Skopje, a large pool of Albanian voters, which Zaev was absolutely hoping on and counting on. Turnout was the worst in the country, like below 30%. So Ahmeti, this is an indication that Ahmeti stabbed Zaev in the back to a large degree. So without losing in the Roma neighborhood, very low turnout in the Albanian neighborhood, losing one of the two central Skopje districts, and losing all the working class, normal people, VMRO voting parts of the city, which are a large majority of the city. SDSM did not stand a chance, so they lost the capital by a large margin. And cherry on top, they lost in Kumanovo, where there was a candidate who split from SDSM because Zaev was, personal, probably business conflicts with Zaev. He did not get along with the selling of the name agenda either, this candidate. So Zaev pulled all stops to destroy him, sent the police there. They had the mayor practically arrested 2 days after the first round of the elections. And VMRO said, of course, we're going to support this guy now. We're going to play spoiler in Zaev's own party. So this guy won as well. So Zaev only won Cinter in Skopje. 3-4 mid-sized cities and 4-5 rural municipalities, and it was too much. It was a disaster for him, so he had to announce that he is resigning. Now, whether he'll resign for real.
Yeah, again, as that's a very comprehensive rundown there, so that's excellent. But again, as I mentioned in the monologue, and as you just mentioned, we don't know as how long is he going to take to actually submit his resignation. I believe he submits it to Parliament or to the President.
I think to Parliament, and the government collapses with him immediately.
Right.
But he said that he's going to take his time because I am resigning. Yes, I am. I promised I will. Yes, sure. But I first need time to prepare the arrangements so that our progressive coalition remains in place. This means he wants to remain in power through SDSM, in coalition with DUI, with BESA, with the dozen smaller parties which are with Zaev at the moment. And he probably wants to appoint a crony, somebody like he can control the government through, and will probably want to appoint himself interior minister if he elevates the interior minister as prime minister or finance minister, something like that. This is his plan at the moment, and this is how he plans to cling on to power, at least for the next few weeks, which are going to be crucial, as everybody is drawing their knives at him, both coalition partners, especially people in his own party, the Albanian parties. Everybody is now out to get him, but this is his initial promise to his supporters.
Right. It's he's trying to, cover his own butt, so to speak, and as you mentioned, cling on to power one way or the other. But also, again, as you mentioned, the knives are out. There was so much backstabbing and double dealing and dirty tricks going on between the government and its various partners at one level or another in one municipality or another. And as has proven the case, of course, nobody likes a loser, especially in politics, and that's what's going to happen. Eventually, he's going to have to go. This is going to pave the way eventually for, I think, early parliamentary elections. I wouldn't think it would be this year. That's far too soon. Getting too close to the holiday season, Christmas, New Year's, or actually New Year's, Christmas. So that, and then of course we've got literally next door in Bulgaria, the elections there in less than 2 weeks for once again for parliament and for president, and of course that does have some effect on Macedonia, given EU negotiations, etc. It's kind of curious as I peruse the news this morning and see all these names that are all so familiar to us and to our listeners. One name that seems to be missing in all of these news reports I'm reading is Shekarinska.
Yeah, she's completely AWOL.
Yes, where has she gone?
She was posting something about NATO this morning, and so she's just playing it cool. Pendarovsky left for the Glasgow climate thing. Cervenkovsky is seen as the big winner in these elections because Zaev himself made out Cervenkovsky to be the power, an actual power in SDSM, probably beyond what he actually, the influence he actually controls. Because Zaev wanted a stab in the back explanation after the first round defeat, and his people kept saying there are people in our own party, Cervenkovsky, wink wink, who betrayed us, but because of the Bulgaria dispute, so because Cervenkovsky broke with the SDSM party, he said, I'm suspending my membership in the party where I was leader for so long, which made me prime minister and president of the country. I'm suspending membership until Zaev is leader because I cannot abide by his policy toward Bulgaria, giving the Bulgarians everything they ask for. So Zaev practically made it look like Cervenkovsky has this number of supporters, voters, possibly even members of parliament who would, conspire with him. And he made an appeal between the two rounds that let us unite, message received, come back to the party. This is not the party only of the rural, the peasant wing. This is also the party of the urban Skopje wing, which Cervenkovsky and Shekarinska and Pendarovsky represent. Come back, vote for me in the second round. And he did this horrible thing. He did this, I'm not shrinking violet in politics. I like a good fight, but this was despicable. This was beyond pale. I'm actually amazed they did it. It was so ugly. It was a car crash of political campaigning, which they did. So practically, Zaev said that I'm going to resign if he tried to point to a big enough achievable goal, which is his party winning in Skopje in the second round, to avoid resigning, right? So he says, if my guy wins against this lady, Daniela Arsovska, who is the chairman of the smaller chamber of commerce, of the mid-sized companies, of the hard-working companies, not the oligarchs. So the people in her team are actually sympathetic to the country, more or less. And she's young, blonde, easygoing, very, very pleasant person, So we are campaigning against her. She's now the main target of, the key to Zaev's survival. So we have to destroy her. So days before, the second week before that, we have 2 weeks between the 2 rounds of election. In the second week, they send out one of these horrible persons in the interior ministry supporting Zaev, stupid enough to carry out these orders, to hold a series of press conferences in which she is accusing Daniela Arsovska of secretly having a Bulgarian citizenship, which, it's a big no-no in the country, because you have to declare you're Bulgarian or that your ancestors were Bulgarian. And, it allows you to work in Europe, travel more easily. For businessmen, it's good because who wants the hassle of, waiting in line at the border and whatnot. You can travel to England easily, soon probably even to the US. But, many people do this, but often people who are financially strapped, they want to go drive a truck in Germany, and this is the easy ticket to do this. So Zaev begins this campaign, but it's not only one press conference. Immediately they sent the director of the Skopje Zoo, who is this idiot working for Zaev, like his thug in Skopje, with a crew to paint over Arsovska's billboards, to put in the label Petric, the city in Bulgaria, and I'm the mayor of Petric. So like she's running for the mayor of a Bulgarian city. So they're using the Bulgarian word for mayor, kmet, instead of the Macedonian word gradonačelnik. And Zaev himself goes on cameras and points, looks straight in the camera. You're not gonna elect this Bulgarian for kmet of Skopje. Skopje is not Petric. And this is the same idiot who a year ago he had this interview over which Crvenkovski broke with him and much of his party broke with him. He said, well, listen, I'm from Strumica, Petric is just across the border, we are brothers, we speak the same language. Now, whether it's Macedonian or Bulgarian, who's to say, we are one and the same. Practically the Bulgarian position that we are one nation, forcibly divided into 2 states. Bulgarians were applauding him. Crvenkovski and a bunch of the left here broke with Zaev over this. And now Zaev says, okay, I'm going to bring them back into the fold by being horrifically brutal toward this nice lady and accusing her of being a Bulgarian agent, sympathizer, plus she's the honorary consul of Hungary, so this is the Orban dictatorship. And then they started saying Russian money, she's receiving Russian money without absolutely zero evidence, and photoshopped evidence, most likely photoshopped evidence for the Bulgarian passport. And so it was brutal. It was despicable. And they burned out any reservoir of goodwill in VMRO, and people who would say now, okay, let's go easy on some people in SDSM. They're, human after all. And, let's bygones be bygones. Let's unite. So they were so horrible to the only lady candidate for mayor of a major city. There is only one other elected in a rural municipality. This was the darkest I've ever seen it. And especially for Zaev, who was saying the exact opposite like a year ago, that we were brothers with the Bulgarians. So one thing was that he turned on a dime, he did a 180, and the other one was how he did it. It was horrific. And then it completely backfired. when we saw a high, first thinking was that, okay, this is going to drive down turnout. In both his party, nobody wants to see somebody being so aggressive toward a woman in the public, but also maybe in the VMRO camp, because, okay, maybe they buy the attack. But higher turnout, but mostly from VMRO and Levica people, it has to be noted, and possibly even the liberal Democrats and Dom people who, you could even sense some have an axe to grind on Zaev, because he's being so nasty toward a female candidate. So he actually probably drove up the turnout against him. And from 8,000 votes victory in the first round for Arsovska against Petra Shelegov, she's now at almost 30,000 votes. So it was great. It was fantastic. I mean, horrible for her. I'm sure her family had horrible time for a few days, but politically it worked out like a charm.
Yeah, well, we've seen that time and again, with candidates as well as appointed officials. I'm thinking of the Supreme Court fights we have over here, where candidates get attacked by the left, and ultimately they prevail, but it does do a lot of damage to them and their families, as you mentioned. And but hopefully, there's a brighter. I know there is a brighter future ahead now, for not just for Skopje with her as mayor, but for the rest of Macedonia with these victories. Now that leads me into this. We should probably touch on the international reaction to this, because of the ramifications it might have down the road with early parliamentary elections. Of course, nothing from the. It's always the U.S. Embassy and the U.K. Embassy are always quick to say something, at least on the Twitter sphere, after their side, meaning the left, wins any elections. In Macedonia, of course, they've been very quiet. The only thing they're talking about is the climate change summit in Glasgow. Of course, Rachel Galloway, the UK ambassador, is there, along with President Pendarovsky, as you mentioned, talking about, because we only have, 12 years, 10 years before impending total disaster of the planet. But they said that, I think, 10 years ago, so I'm not sure where we are on that timeline. Actually, maybe it already happened. Maybe the planet did end, and we're just living in the Matrix now. I'm not sure.
On fumes.
but Carl Bildt, everybody's favorite perpetual pest, former Prime Minister of Sweden, tweets out, "Unlikely to be top global news, but a political crisis in Emoji Flag Macedonia is the least we need now in order to get to the critical Emoji EU flag enlargement agenda in the Balkans moving." So he, of course, always champions the side of the far left, the progressives, etc. He calls this a political crisis. And if you look around at people like him and their ilk, they're all basically saying the same thing. They fear a return of the center-right, VMRO-DPMNE, to parliament, to government. And we can expect to see more tweets, more words, more statements of this type from the people like Carl Bildt. Don't know if Kale will weigh in on this at some point. Kate's going to have to at some point, I guess.
Yep.
But, especially if Zaev is actually going to finally step down once he accepts his own resignation. Right. So the results will be. Are there any last minute? What's the word I'm looking for? Well, I guess they've got to certify. The SEC has to certify the results here. You've got a number of folks that ran for mayor that in Parliament, so they have to.
Yeah.
What am I trying to say?
Zaev is counting that he'll actually expand his number of seats for SDSM, because Bilal Kasami in Tito is becoming mayor. So he's going down from 4 seats for Besa down to 3. But even with 3 seats, Besa can bring down the government. DUI can, of course, bring down the government. LDP and Dom, who ran against Zaev, and their people probably voted for VMRO candidates. Even their mayoral candidate in Skopje openly endorsed the VMRO candidate, not Zaev, who is his nominal ally and longtime friend. So they can bring down the government. VMRO, NP, and a few other smaller parties. So there are like 4 or 5 factions within the coalition, within Zaev's coalition, which can bring down the government even before we start looking into how stable is his core group of SDSM alone, discounting all the coalition partners. So there is, I'm not sure what's the immediate advantage for anybody to be the first to pull the plug on Zaev, because they would not be getting ministries in the government or money from VMRO or anything like that. Because this would, it's clear that if VMRO forms a government within this parliament, so Zaev has 46 seats, but only like 35 are SDSM proper, the rest is BESA and whatnot. VMRO has 44 seats with much less impurities inside. They're much more VMRO cohesive, but still have some coalition partners. And Zaev with DUI together and the DPA party and BESA, they get to like 62 seats. And you need 61 to form a government. So this is why I say any small group in Zaev's faction, if they leave, the government goes down. VMRO with Levica, who they are now in practically a coalition with VMRO, voted for VMRO, buried the hatchets which were drawn for much of the ahead of the campaign. Even Mickovsky would personally get agitated over Levica. Now, this all seems to be forgotten once Zaev practically made the elections about himself. And, this was such a big target, so Levica was not going to miss it. They couldn't. All sorts of differences will get buried once Zaev made the election about himself and his political survival. So Levica immediately joined with VMRO after this. And so VMRO, Levica, and the Alliance of Albanians and Alternative Parties, if they all together they have 58 votes against 62 for Zaev. So any small defection from Zaev's coalition brings down the government, and they can form a new one. But it would be very unstable. Even if VMRO leads it, it would probably not have a majority of Albanians on board, unless people defect from DUI, which is also a possibility, and BESA joins the opposition. This would be a government that would have to organize early elections. SDSM are saying, okay, some on their side are saying, those who are more reasonable and who do not see Zaev surviving for much long and think that if he tries to hang on, he will just make it worse for his party. They say, let's form a technical government, not a VMRO-led government. VMRO says we form a new government and we organize early elections. And in the Albanian parties, as I said, so DUI lost Titov and Gostiva, which is a bad, serious rebuke for Ahmeti. They won in Skopje's Chire district, but this is a faction of DUI which does not like the current makeup of the government and was loudly announcing that it may leave the coalition. So this might be more trouble for Zaev and Ahmeti than it's worth. They lost Titova to BESA, which is within the government, now greatly emboldened, greatly encouraged, much stronger now. So they would probably, if they are to remain in the government, they may demand more ministries, more money, more influence, after defeating DUI in this all-important race in Titova. DUI obviously did not vote for Zaev in Skopje. They stabbed him in the back. They delivered less votes, I think, than in the first round for Shiligov for the Skopje mayoral race. So it's an open betrayal and challenge to Zaev. While Zaev called on his people to support the DUI candidate in Kičeva, which was the hugest betrayal he did, because VMRO were running a Macedonian candidate in Kičeva, which is an ethnically mixed city. It is majority Macedonian in the city, but it was gerrymandered to have Albanian villages where Ahmeti comes from, added to the city, so to artificially make it majority Albanian. So VMRO ran a doctor who is married to an ethnic Albanian, who is like the nicest, friendliest neighbor you can imagine and whatnot. DUI are running the incumbent mayor, who is a former terrorist commander. So it couldn't be more stark difference.
Fatmir Dejan.
Yeah. So a bunch of Albanians actually voted for VMRO because they're fed up of DUI controlling this city as their own personal, fief, as Ahmeti's personal ownership. While Zaev was calling on Macedonians to vote for the terrorist commander against the ethnic Macedonian married to an Albanian doctor person. And in the end, there was an open arrival of buses and airplanes because much of the Albanians all across the western part of Macedonia actually live abroad. Turnout in many of these parts can hardly reach 30%, even with the best motivation. The people simply are not there. So in this race, because VMRO insisted on fingerprint devices, you cannot just ballot stuff, Kičevo or any part of the country as easily as before. So they had to fly in plane loads of Albanians from Kičevo who live in Germany, Switzerland, wherever, to vote. They were personally welcomed by a minister in the Zaev government from DUI. And in the end, for much of the evening, the VMRO candidate was leading in the city and eventually lost by like a few hundred votes, which, there was reports that even SDSM people in the city refused Zaev's order to vote for the terrorist commander and voted for the Macedonian. But if some of them still listened to Zaev, then, Zaev got the huge bad rap among Macedonians for forcing them to vote for by far the worst candidate in Kičevo against national interests. And he got nothing in return. He was hoping that this will deliver him Albanian votes in Skopje, and he got visibly, publicly betrayed and shafted on this. So DUI is no longer a sure, ally, even if, he manages to hold on to all the other smaller parties, which he forced this morning again, like he did after the first round, to publicly declare loyalty to the government, and most of them did, not all of them. But he's again forcing all smaller coalition partners to go on the record to say we still support the government. How long this can endure, nobody knows.
That's an excellent rundown of that little snippet there of the race in Kičevo. Of course, DUI, Ali Ahmeti's party, has probably got a lot of actual cash, given their trafficking and rumored trafficking in women, girls, guns, drugs, etc. So they could afford to fly everybody into Macedonia to travel to Kičevo to vote for the DUI candidate, the former terrorist. And I'm sure, of course, all those people that came in were duly vaccinated or had a negative PCR test, of course. But, I think it's worth pausing for just a moment and dwelling on the fact that Ali Ahmeti, the former terrorist commander of the National Liberation Army, who threatened in 2001 in March in an interview with David Binder from, I think he was reporting either with MSNBC or the New York Times, I can't remember which now, said that our goal is to remove, quote, historically, or to remove, quote, Slav forces from historic Albanian lands, unquote. And then he formed DUI, the party, and he's been around for almost 20 years, in power, mostly, because when somebody wins parliament and threatens not to include him, and there was 2008 or 2006, I can't remember, he wasn't in parliament for 2 years, DUI wasn't. But he threatens regularly, as is his modus operandus, threatens to take up guns and head to the hills and start another war. And he's looking old. He's in his early 60s, I believe. He's a heavy smoker. Rumors of Parkinson's disease and other things. He's not going to be around much longer, and this is going to have a physical toll on him, certainly a mental toll, but a physical toll on him to see his political empire built out of a terrorist base begin to crumble. And as I've always said, the ethnic minority Albanian parties within Macedonia have always been cult of personality parties. When the leader goes, the party goes, and you can see that right on down the line. PDP, Emir Meri, he's dead and his party's dead. DPA, Arben Jaferi, he's dead. His party's dead. And you can just go down the line. The only two enduring parties are SDSM and VMRO-DPMNE, because they've got a very long institutional record in the past. Whether you like them or not, it doesn't matter. That's just a fact. Now, the leaders, of course, can be, cult of personality leaders as well. That's certainly possible in any party, in any country. But it is a definite fact with the ethnic minority Albanian parties within the Republic of Macedonia. So I think at some point, within the next few years, we can look forward to seeing Ali Ahmeti depart from the scene, and you can define depart however you like. So this could very well be the beginning of his rapid decline and end.
Yeah,
we'll see.
the quicker way for VMRO to grab power would be through DUI, but they don't seem eager too much for this. He's really, discredited, especially in the eyes of the Albanians. And like in this period, 2006-2008, when VMRO sided with DPA and actually had some proper, hardworking, educated, respectable candidates in the government who happened to be ethnic Albanians from DPA, as opposed to what Ahmeti usually offers. They might try to do this again, but it might mean a longer period to form even this technical government in the interim that would organize elections. On the other hand, I'm not sure what the better approach here, whether to strike while the iron is hot and finish Zaev now, or wait for his own party to do him in, his own factions, with the rumors of inflation and the not even rumor. Actually, Zaev was openly acknowledging this. We are about to run out of coal. We are going to achieve the Glasgow-Paris climate treaty utopia and ideal of reducing our carbon footprint to zero, right in the middle of winter. So, yeah, whether VMRO wants to be in charge when this formally happens, I don't know. But yeah, whether wait for DUI to collapse as well, because of these dynamics which we discussed. One faction is much stronger now, which is not the Ahmeti's faction, and Besa is much stronger now. So yeah, we'll see. My instinct tells me they need to move quickly. Do not let Zaev consolidate. Do not give him time. But we'll see. One of the negative, dark campaign moments which Zaev launched on top of this Bulgaria disaster with the mayor of Skopje was that he started warning that if we are not in power, we relaxed interethnic relations, especially with Albanians, with DUI, with the neighbors, blah, blah, blah. So if we are not in charge, expect to see more interethnic attacks, like stabbing, fights between, school kids, which happen all the time. And actually under Zaev, we had some of the most horrific cases, like the killing of a Macedonian football fan in Skopje, and another killing in Lisice. So it's not, Zaev was completely lying when he said that such incidents stopped under his command, but the fact that he mentioned this was practically telling the people, you vote against me, I'll get DUI to start causing trouble in the city and start attacking people randomly, and you'll see interethnic tensions rise. We will make interethnic tensions rise. This is the person who, after all, lied to the Albanian people about that he has evidence about the Good Friday massacre in 2012, about the Kumanov attack in 2015, just to get their votes. So he's absolutely eager to inflame interethnic tensions in the country. But he would try to make it look like, okay, see, VMRO won, and now we have stabbings in the school buses and stuff like that again, like low-grade troubles style scenario.
Well, that's excellent, excellent analysis, excellent wrap on the entire second round of the local elections. Again, we're recording this on Monday, November 1, the day after the second and final round of the local elections in Macedonia, episode 125 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. we'll try and get this out as quickly as possible before Zaev revokes his resignation and before he refuses to accept his resignation from himself, and go from there. So always exciting. We'll see what happens next in Macedonia.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I mean, this is going to be an excellent, very interesting times, and hopefully some very much deserved comeuppance for Zaev and his gang.
Amen. All right. Good talking to you, Cvetin.
Yeah, you too, buddy. Take care.
Take care.